For me, characters in science fiction are no different from characters in a contemporary drama. We have to understand what drives them, what's important to them, what makes them unique.
So when playing Journey to the Foundation, what's super interesting is you can learn a lot about the characters. You can learn a lot about their pasts, and not just their past, but the plot that is taking place as you're going through, you're making your way through the story.
Hopefully, all of them feel like three-dimensional characters that have their own flaws, that have internal contradictions, all of the little things that make people so nuanced and interesting.
So the process of creating a new character generally starts with getting a brief from the narrative team. The narrative team usually fleshes out each character in terms of who they are, their personality traits, quirks, their background, their story. And so that gives us a good jumping point to start off as the concept team.
I'm always fascinated by characters who are neither good nor evil. Bo is really a person who believes they're doing the best thing and may be doing that in somewhat unsavory ways, but always has a very, very good reason for it.
This array is all that stands between us and hundreds of barbarian worlds that think the Galactic Empire is weak and ripe for the taking.
Bo was initially more of a side character. We wanted a spy master character. There's a lot of intrigue in the game. There's a lot of who can I trust?
For him, he's part of the Empire, so generally for our Empire style, it's a little more clean, a little more cohesive with some references to high fashion as well. Things like gold trim and purple accents, which set off his more monotone overall color scheme.
I don't really think of archetypes when I think of characters. I initially think of what is their function in the story? How are they pulling the player in different directions? In an interactive story, it's really important that there are all these forces coming at the player and telling them that they should go left, and another character will be like, no, 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 don't go left, go right. And that tends to be the way that I think of characters. What is their function in the story? Where are they going to take the player in the course of this adventure? And then also, what are they going to introduce us to? So for example, Bo in the game is the person who best speaks for the importance of the Galactic Empire and why it needs to be preserved.
I think Bo is kind of a strong character, and my inspiration for creating him is kind of older Asian men figures in my life, and just even seeing some of their characteristics within Bo while I was creating him, and being Asian myself, it was just cool to have the opportunity to create an Asian character who is part of the main cast and has quite a large role in the game.
And it was also really nice to have a character who was a patriot, who believed in the Empire. Because a lot of, obviously it's easy to create sympathy with the Foundation. The series is called Foundation. But this was going to be a choice-based game, so we thought it was really important to make the Empire worth protecting. We needed a character that could do that for us. And Bo is really the person who can speak for the Empire, for the good it's done, for the 12,000 years of peace that the Empire has created. And we needed to understand the Foundation in the game. Astoria is really the way that we do that. She's the one who teaches us about the importance of the Foundation, what it stands for, what its history is, what its purpose is, and why we should join up with them.
I worked most closely with Astoria Nyria. One thing that I was really determined to add to their character bios, both internally and externally in the game, is a sense of empathy. As a female identifying person of color, I really resonated with those two characters. I wanted to make sure that their motivations and where they were coming from were really grounded and fleshed out. So it wasn't just us looking at their actions and trying to figure out why they're doing what they're doing, but having a defined reason of this is what drives this character and this is why they're making these decisions.
So when it comes to Astoria and the Viceroy, I especially like these two characters because, again, they feel like at times they're polar opposites. And when the player is having a conversation with the Viceroy, for the most part, there's an intent. I think it's nice to have that intent of like making the player feel metaphorically small, right? The Viceroy is an imposing force. The Viceroy is very powerful. The Viceroy, in many cases, talks down to you. I think that's something that shines in the dialogue. And then again, not without reason, right? The Viceroy has her motives. Astoria, on the other hand, is a character that's there ready to go with you on a road trip. You know there will be a trillion challenges along the way, but you have someone you can rely on and someone that at times offers guidance and sometimes relies on your guidance.
So in the process for creating Astoria, one of the first Empire characters we created as well. And so just kind of getting some influence from Bo, who came before her in designs. The same sort of high fashion influence as well. You'll notice just on her arms and like the different elements that stand out from the overall sort of very put together look. With her background raised in power, we also gave her, just more of an affluent look with the jewelry and accessories that she has. So you can kind of tell that she came up in a very privileged upbringing.
I need her to have confident posture quite often, and even when she was, tasking people out, she often wouldn't assume that they wouldn't listen to her. So any kind of gesture or confidence posture like that would definitely be something I look for from the actors.
I've worked a lot with Vex. She's a very tough, sort of, not mercenary figure, but something along those lines. She has a lot of fire and a lot of anger and a lot of guilt, but she also has quite a bit of humanity in her, a lot of softness that you get to uncover and witness throughout the game.
In Asimov's universe, there's the Galactic Empire, and then everyone who's not part of the Galactic Empire are considered barbarians. Vex is our barbarian character. We wanted to really put a face on that and understand how this character was really othered and discriminated against by the Empire, but could also be a very sympathetic and strong character. She's incredibly tough, she's sarcastic, she's a lot of fun, voiced by the incredibly talented Jennifer Hale.
There's a lot of complexities that we were able to do with Vex because of just like her placement in the game's story, wherein she is a lot of the ways in which we can complexify the Zor.
I think probably Vex is the character who visually changed the most because Vex was created earliest in the process. She was always a character we knew we were going to have in the game.
You should be able to see it on the horizon soon enough. Supposedly the first landfall debates were held there.
The Zor are something that we created. She was going to be emblematic of the Zor. She was going to be the symbol of the Zor people.
She's aggressive towards the player and is very gruff, but she's also our main way of getting to know the Zor as a faction, and also humanizing about the latter half of the story. And it was a delight to be able to have this older character that Jennifer Hale brought a lot of really, really good voice work to, that is also queer, and like that's just a part of the game.
I was really intrigued by the diversity of perspectives in the characters. This question of foundation and empire can come off as a very black and white, good and evil kind of thing. When it comes to something as established and stable as the empire starting to deteriorate and crumble at the edges, it's not a black and white thing. And I think one thing when I looked at the range of characters was their perspective on the foundation and the empire was really diverse. And we get to see that issue from a lot of different perspectives.
One thing that's really important when designing culturally diverse characters is getting a lot of different voices involved, a lot of different perspectives. As much as we can research, the best thing to do is to have someone with lived experience actually tell you what is good and representation and what is not.
The main characters were set very early on, but we had a lot of small characters that we were able to set, and then we were able to go to art and say, this is, gender identity, this is the age, this is the vibe of the character that we're going for. And then as the concept art was coming out and as they're implemented, we kept that discussion with art open with some pretty amazing results.
One character in specific was Ezro, who is our non-binary character in this game. To not fall into any stereotype traps or anything, we consulted with our internal EDI team to just get a conversation going and see what suggestions they might have so we can flesh this character out. A lot of the suggestions that they gave us actually made it to the final character.
Mo and I, my writer and I, worked closely with art to bring Ezro to life, and while Ezro doesn't appear in the levels that I designed, I did have quite a bit of influence in what Ezro's visual design ended up being, which was a very cool process.
I'm more like an entrepreneur than a pirate.
Spoken like a resident of the Galactic Core. I'm a realist, that's all. We're living on borrowed time out here. The Empire is a rotting husk. We can only feast on its carcass for so long.
As a writer, I love Ezro for their flaws, mostly. I think they're genuinely fascinating character flaws, is that they are quite ruthless and they don't take well to being betrayed. And they also have quite high expectations of just about every person. I think the first thing the player sees of them is them like on a little hologram receiving a call from one of their lieutenants, and they're like, yeah, don't fail me. It's like, it would be delightful if you didn't fail me again.
We were kind of asked to consult on Ezro's character design because we have an insight into perhaps what good representation could look like for a trans character like Ezro. Well, we're both trans, which helps. I think one of the coolest parts was having the opportunity to adjust the clothing on the concept that we ended up going with in order to include Ezro's top surgery scars, which is for non-binary and trans masc people, a form of gender-affirming care that is very common, and seeing those scars for a trans gamer, I think, would be a really special moment.
It's not really often that you get to have queer or trans characters in games where they have plots that are also not around them being queer or trans.
Character personalities show in two major ways besides the writing. Once the writing's done, we bring the characters to life with voice acting, so vocal performance, and then physical performance, so animation.
For some of our main characters, we want to kind of bring out that personality. For instance, Bo again. He was very distinct. We didn't want him to stand like very boorish or he's very cavalier. He seemed more like a character that's very calm and controlled.
I think there's a magical process that happens every time in game development. And I would say it's not particular to game development, it's more about breathing life into stories. But in VR and video games, it is so cool to see a character that previously was not animated. And then there's that moment when you are working and you load up the engine and you see, wow, this is magical. And then you add the gestures, because now, of course, it's not the flat dialogue that's being delivered right now. They have the lines, the content is there, but the content has personality.
Really good voice acting makes a huge difference. We have spent most of the production of this game listening to TTS, which is text-to-speech, and it's generated by software. It just makes your ears bleed as you listen to it over and over and over. And then you bring in these actors and they bring all of this nuance and depth to these lines.
So when it comes to the voice acting for Astoria and the Viceroy, the actors nailed it. And they nailed it because Astoria is your friend. Astoria is someone that you can rely on and that at times relies on you. And not just from the moments where things are exciting and maybe there's some action involved, but there are pivotal, dramatic moments in the game where you get to see that voice acting also showing its vulnerability. And then you have the Viceroy. She is a force to be reckoned with and to be feared as well. The voice acting just really made it happen, you know, by showing these two very different personalities that are connected, and when you see them talking to each other as well.
Journey to Foundation is the most ambitious story that Archiact has ever told. And that to me is the thing that makes me the most proud. I think it's a very exciting story. I think it's a very, takes players in a lot of different directions. It challenges them in really interesting ways. And that makes me extremely proud. That the studio was willing to commit to telling this story with this number of characters in a VR space, with this amount of ambition in terms of the spaces and the spectacle and the visuals. That's one of the main reasons I'm still here after 5 years, and why I continue to want to work with the studio, is they are really committed to telling great stories.